Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise podcast. We haven't had a baseball podcast yet this week, so we're going to have one because why not? Dave Brown would normally be on this week, is on assignment. I don't know by who, but he is. So you're stuck with just me. I will admit I haven't been keeping as close tabs as normal on the Cubs lately. But last I checked, everything was going really well. And I can't imagine that there's any reason to think that it's not still doing that. Why don't we let's just check in with the Cubs real quick. Doing good. Working their way up the standings. Nice lead on the Brewers. Oh. Uh-oh. Well, the Brewers are hot. I had nothing to do about that. They're just playing really well. And I'm not really hitting anymore. Uh-oh. And no. Totally fucked. Well, that's the end of the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next week with all your prize. Now, I get it. It is frustrating. The Brewers never lose. They currently have won 11 in a row. It's their second 11-game winning streak of the year. But here's the thing, right? The Cubs hadn't been playing shit baseball. The Brewers would still be ahead of them, but the lead wouldn't be that big. But it is. And it's mostly the Cubs' fault, right? Like, you can't control. The only time you control whether the Brewers win or lose is when you play them. Cubs are the last team to beat them. 1 out of 3 up there. It was a sterling effort by the boys. But, if you just keep winning, you'll be fine. But the Cubs under 500 since the All-Star break and just not hitting at all, which is always fun. And we've been through this before with them, most notably 2018 and 2019. 2018, where it sabotaged a really good season. They won 95 games, but the Brewers caught them at the end and took their playoff spot, and the Cubs had to play the dog shit Rockies and lost to them somehow. And then 19, they just completely missed the playoffs altogether. And then Theo fired Joe because he just couldn't get to Rossi fast enough. What if somebody else hires Dave Ross? Yeah. What if somebody else finds out whether that dumb shit can manage instead of you? Maybe keep your World Series winning manager. It's only been 2 that have ever had. Only one who didn't also play. But that was fine. Why not? Good job. Anyway. I was thinking about this. When have we seen this before? Where they just stop hitting and all of a sudden what looked like a promising season goes right in a shitter. Well, let's see. It happened in 2018. It happened in 2019. It happened in the COVID year where they got off to the 13-3 start and then couldn't hit again. So 21, I guess it happened then, but that season was awful. 22, they didn't try to do anything, which maybe is the mode that they're most comfortable in. And then it happened in 23, got Ross fired, and it happened last year. Is there, if only we could think of one connecting thing, is there one guy who's been here for the whole thing? Well, there's Jed. So there's Jed. But there's also Ian Happ. So I blame it on him. He's the only one who's part of this. He actually was pretty good in 20. Except remember when he fouled the ball off his face and then couldn't hit? Right off his eye. I think the hair plugs couldn't protect him from that. But yeah, everything else, he's had an intimate participatory role in all of it. So I'm just blaming him, which I do mostly. Anyway. Today, another great effort where they were staked to a huge 1-0 lead and couldn't hold it. It's about as good as it gets right now. Get a 1-run lead and hang on. Maybe play the Cardinals, and then you can add on. But other than that, don't. Whatever you do, don't add any more runs. You're good. That's fine. We've learned some interesting things. We've learned that Kyle Tucker has now taken batting practice twice on the field, first time in 5 years. Well, I guess it's news because he doesn't do it, but it shouldn't be news because he sucks right now and you got to fucking try something. I'd like to see him take batting practice on the field during a game. It would be nice. I also found out that the Cubs are trying. Boog was full of insight today. Most of his insight had to do with the Cubs Fantasy Football League. I thought it was funny that Tucker's in it. So you're not going to be a Cub by week 8. What do you care? I think he knows suckers when he sees them. He's like, oh, I can take all these guys' money. He's a co-owner. I don't like that. Fantasy, baseball, football, whatever. It's just too time consuming and complicated for you to do it by yourself. You need a partner for it. I mean, why not just go with a fully staffed front office? Hire some scouts. Why not? But apparently Tucker and Quentin Berry are going to run their team. And they've already done what Boog said. They've already done multiple mock drafts, which is just the dumbest. So we learned that, which is nice. Miguel Amaya came back after a very long stint on the injured list. What was his? His was an oblique. I don't remember. I can't keep all the injuries straight. But he was gone for a long time. Didn't play in his first game back, but then he got to play on Wednesday night in Toronto. Came up in a big spot, and the Cubs are bunting now because they're so pathetic at getting it. Why is it when you're not hitting, you're bunting? You're just giving you're making outs already very well. You're just going to give some away. Tried to bunt, couldn't. The Blue Jays were really good at throwing wild pitches in this series when the Cubs needed it. Were trying to bunt. They still had him trying to bunt after that. Runner was in scoring position, and he's still up there trying to bunt. Couldn't bunt, but he swung away at a 2-strike pitch, and it basically was a bunt. And he ran to first, and he hit the bag weird. And now that I guess we know, well, we don't know it's the Cubs. Early diagnosis from the crack Cub training staff is a severely sprained ankle. I thought maybe he Schwarbered himself, and because they X-ray the ankle, and the ankle's not broken, and they act like that's something. But then they do an MRI, and they're like, well, but every ligament in your knee is shredded. But I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know if they seem to think it's just the ankle, but we'll see. When he hit the bag, he flew in the air like Nordberg in the Naked Gun when he was in a wheelchair and he goes down in the Angel Stadium. He goes down the row and then hits the. And it sucks. He's a good player, and they need him because their current starting catcher, who we're going to get to in a minute. Yikes. So he's out again. And it totally justified what I thought was a terrible move. When Amaya came back, the Cubs were like, oh, we can't get rid of the carjacker. We can't get rid of Reese McGuire. That ball of fire, he's just too good. We can't get rid of him. So they let John Birdie go. So Birdie's last thing he ever did as a Cub was he came in, he tried to steal second, and his little oven mitt bounced up. What the fuck does he need an oven mitt for? Who cares if he jams a finger? He's not doing anything but running. Should have been. I would have released him for wearing the oven mitt, not for anything else. So they had to decide what to do, and the sensible thing would have been to go back to 2 catchers because your bench already sucks ass. And are you really comfortable with a bench that on pretty much every day will have 2 catchers who can't play any other position than catch? Justin Turner, 41-year-old who shouldn't be playing any positions, and then Willie Castro, who's I think maybe the Cubs think Willie, and he's very versatile. I think they're pretty sure he could play multiple positions at once. He's a one-man bench. That's all we need. Let him play center and left and second. No, you can't do that. No, you need an actual bench. So the reason that they wanted to keep Reese was, I think it's like me. They haven't run out of him jerking off in his car jokes. They still got some, and they're like, oh, we haven't used them all yet. We need to keep him around till at least September. The reason that they claim was, Reese is out of options. So if you let him go, somebody's going to claim him, right? He's a useful backup catcher. Somebody's going to claim him. You're not going to have him. And then if something happens to Kelly or Miguel Amaya, then you don't have him. You can't get him back. I get that. I think it worked out. Worst case, best case scenario for them. Worst case was they lost Amaya again. The best case was they only went with the unwieldy bench for 2 days because, oh my God, it worked itself out. That's not how it's supposed to work itself out. It's not supposed to work itself out with by the guy just bends his ankle in 16 places in the second day and it works. But their thing was, okay, then we won't have anybody to bring up. And it just pissed me off because I know when they called Owen Caissie up, everybody's like, oh, the Cubs' number 1 prospect is up. Sahadev wrote, he didn't write the headline, but he wrote the article. He basically wrote the same thing in the article that the Cubs called up their top prospect, Owen Caissie. I read on The Athletic where he's not the top prospect. Keith Law has him at best the 3rd best prospect in the organization behind Moises Ballesteros and Kevin Alcantara. And I would say it doesn't make any sense to bring Owen Caissie up unless you're going to basically say, all right, Happ, you haven't hit, and you and Seiya basically are going to share DH for a while, and we're going to play the lumbering redhead and left. I had somebody send me a message about, well, I think he's kind of he's like Pete Crow, only because he gets a lot of production on his speed. It's like I know that's not right. I've seen him, and now I've seen him in the flesh, and there's a lot of flesh, and it's very white. It's kind of nice, he got to come up, and he got to debut up there in Canada, where he hails from, and his family made it. And then Boog told us that they're leaving on Friday morning at 5 a.m. to drive to Chicago. I don't care. That's nice. I'm glad they're coming. I don't need the itinerary. We're supposed to meet them at the parking lot of the hotel and wave goodbye. Why do we need to know that it's 5 o'clock in the morning? Some people get up early, Boog. It just happens, especially Canadians. 5 o'clock in Canada, it's metric. That's like noon here, I think. I don't know. I just know that when I lived in Traverse City, Michigan, I lived north of parts of Canada. That shouldn't. How does that happen? I don't know. But it just seemed to me like the play there was to just bring Ballesteros back and have him around to DH because he can hit. I guess we have to watch Owen prove he can't first. Is that what we're up to? I can see the Cubs being like, well, the fans are mad at us because they didn't make it. We didn't make a big trade. But we're going to show what a ball of fire old Caissie is there, and that'll justify it. I don't think it's going to happen. The saddest day in the prospect perverts' minds is when the prospect actually comes up, because then that's when the prospect starts to prove that that's no Donnie DeWeese. Remember that? Donnie DeWeese's mom used to be mean to me on Twitter because I made fun of Donnie. He had such a funny name, and it was just making a joke about just a mediocre Cub minor leaguer, and that's the one I used. And clearly, what was her name? I used to know her name. Donna, maybe? Donna DeWeese? Donnie DeWeese? That's probably, it can't be right. She found me. Goodly. It's like, let it go, lady. Your kid's a fine athlete. One of the best athletes in the country. He's not a Major League Baseball player, and it's never going to happen. Sorry. Anyway, but that I thought it was a terrible sign for the future of Moises Ballesteros that they kept Reese McGuire, right? Because what they're saying is, over the last 6 weeks of the season, if one of our catchers goes down, we can't even bring Moises up to be the backup for 6 weeks. Like if Miguel Amaya launches himself off the bag into the nether regions of Rogers Center, and we just going to play Carson Kelly like a normal catcher, 5 out of every 6 games, we can't trust Moises for the one behind the plate. We just can't do it. That's the message they sent when they did that, was we have to keep Reese around just in case. It's not great. Speaking of catchers, like I don't not like Carson Kelly. He seems like a nice guy. He had a great start to the season. He's had a solid season as a catcher, but I don't know what's worse. Oog the other day said, commenting on, you could almost hear him read the stats across from left to right and then go, Oog. Talking about the monster year. That was his word, monster. The monster year Carson Kelly's had at the plate. He's got 13 homers and 38 RBIs. 38 RBIs. But it's worse than that. And so before I get to that, so I don't know what's worse. A lot of times when I have a problem with a Cub player, I have a problem with Marquis being disingenuous with us about what the player is. And that's really the main reason that I just loathe Ian Happ, right? He is a bad baseball player. I used to say he's not a bad baseball player. He is kind of bad. You go back, like his last 82 games, he's hitting 210 with a 343. No, it's less than that. 313 on base. It's bad. Whatever it is, it's bad. And it's gone on for more than half a season. And he didn't get off to a good start. And then he only kind of played good for a few weeks, but then he's been bad ever since. And he can't run. And the Cubs it was his birthday the other day, and they made a nice little graphic for social media to wish Ian a happy birthday. And it's a picture of him. It certainly looks like he is tagged up and he's running from second to third. And there's probably not a throw because the ball probably drove an outfielder into the ivy. More like Andre Dawson. They have to pull him out by his feet. And I have never seen anyone look slower in a still photo than Ian Happ did in that picture. He doesn't move anymore. He did throw a guy out at the plate the other night in Toronto. I can't remember, who was it? Was it their backup catcher? And it was like, okay, good. I'm glad they did, because then, they needed to cut the run down. The runner had his speed is the 5th percentile in Major League Baseball. That doesn't mean it's elite as being slow. That's what 5th percentile is. And the Blue Jays had no problem running on Happ on a one hopper to left. Like, let's give it a shot. It's worth it. Anyway, so if that's the idea, right, we're going to play Caissie and we're going to play less Happ, or we're going to play less Seiya and we're going to have Happ DH, which that's a whole waste of time. But Cubs seem to be good at wasting time. And it's funny, Happ is back to not hitting at all right-handed again. So last year we had the narrative that he's much improved left-handed. He's changed his approach and he's not swinging as many bad balls right-handed. And then his stats were still terrible and he still struck out a lot. Boog always cracks me up when he talks about, he and JD, I give them credit for at least putting out some of the bad stats as we watch this bad run of offense. Because he did say, over his last 37 games, Ian Happ is only batting 188, which was true. But, even when he's struggling, he's walking. So I went back and looked up his last 37 games. And yes, 188 batting average. And his on-base average was 9. That's not good. That's not a lot of walks. It's a lot of bad. But last year, the narrative was, he's really cutting down on it. But he just kept striking out. It didn't help. And all he's really done with his new approach that he adopted last year is he just doesn't really hit for any kind of power now. I guess he's up to 14 homers. He was stuck on 3 for a long time. He hit 1 homer and a 1-0 win. I remember that. So that was a big one. The rest of them, I don't remember any of them being like, thank God for Ian Happ. And he hit cleanup the other day, which just made me want to explode. And that's my problem with Carson Kelly, right? It's not that he plays. It's fine. He's a good catcher. And he's not a terrible offensive player. RBIs are a team stat. If guys aren't on and you don't hit a million home runs, you're not going to drive in a lot of runs. But he bats with guys on base, and he just doesn't drive them in. He's had a couple of huge at bats in the last couple of years. There was at no point did you think he was going to get a hit. It was just like, here we go. This inning's over. So I looked some things up for our buddy Carson. He has 38 RBIs on the season. This is recording this on August 14th. That's a long way into the season to have 38 RBIs. Do you know how many he had in April? 21. He had 21 RBIs in April. He has 17 in May, June, July, and half August. And he's been batting cleanup over and over and over again. He has hit cleanup in 24 games. In those 24 games, he has 11 RBIs. That's not good. But how about this? He's hit 5th in 19 games. You know how many RBIs he has when he hits 5th? This is mind-boggling. 1. He has 1. He hit a homer. He drove himself in. And he played 6 games in the 6th spot. I was looking at him batting like in the middle of the order. All of his production came early in the year. He was batting 8th or 9th. And I got news for you. That's where he should be. Just put him back there. Let's get him the least amounts of at-bats. Him and Happ can hang out down there if you would insist on playing him. His last 247 plate appearances, he has 17 RBIs. And he's batting cleanup on a team that thinks it's going to the playoffs. Cool. But he's not alone. Our buddy Petecrow is going through it, folks. He's 2 for his last 38. He took Thursday off, gear up for the Pirates. I don't know. I believe Paul Skeens is pitching all 3 games in the series. That'll be fun. PCA 2 for 38 in August. These are his August numbers. Remember last year, August took off. There it is. Pete. It's all come together. The greatest August in the history of the Cubs. This August, not quite as good. 3 for 41. No homers. No RBIs. No walks. Ooh, that's not really news for Pete. 15 strikeouts in 41 at bats. His slash line, 073, 098, 193. Yikes. That's not good. But at least he lines up next to a perennial all-star, a guy he started the all-star game with this year, Kyle Tucker. Kyle, he'll just pick up the slack. Pete, we know he's young, growing pains. You're going to go through it. You're going to have hot streaks and cold streaks, and you got to figure this stuff out, and you got to go through all of it. That's fine. But you got a seasoned veteran, superstar player, batting right next to you. He'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. In August, Kyle Tucker, he's 6 for 40. And he's hitting 150. That's his batting average. But his on-base average, Boog tell you, he takes a lot of walks. He's always productive, even when he's not hitting. Lots of walks. 25 on base. And then 150 slug, because all of his hits are singles, all 6 of them. And the one that drove in a run the other day was a parachute pop-up. It was very reminiscent of that would have had to have been game 3 of the last playoff series the Cubs won against the Nationals. Anthony Rizzo was really struggling. He'd struggled at the end of the season. He was struggling in the playoffs. And he drove in the winning run, the go-ahead run. It became the winning run because they hung on to it. And it was a pop-up that whoever was playing shortstop for the Nats, I don't remember, it was probably the great Wilmer Defoe. It was probably Trey Turner. I don't remember. But he just couldn't. I mean, the thing hung up in the air for a day and a half, but it was in the perfect spot. He couldn't catch it. It was hit 4 miles an hour with a launch angle of 359 degrees. Is that possible? I don't know. I don't know my geometry very well. and it dropped in. And remember, Rizzo, as the inning ended, was walking, he was like handing his helmet, and we're going to bring his glove out to him. He's screaming, "Respect me!" That was the Kyle Tucker the other day. He is getting mad, at least, which I guess is good. He's throwing his helmet around, his bats. It's like, it's probably not the helmet's fault, Kyle. I know you really have never struggled. Lucky us. You picked now to do it. And it was one of the things that we didn't really talk about when they made the trade, but it's a real thing. And that's the Cubs clearly thought this was a perfect world for them to get Kyle Tucker in the last year of his contract because they wouldn't have to pay him next year when they just don't let him come back. And he'd be playing for a contract, and he's a great player, and they get one great season out of him. But you do run into a problem, and I don't know, maybe it's an injury. It's probably a compilation of things. It's the K-Tel Records compilation of Kyle Tucker excuses for the terrible second half. It could be that the guy who's trying to earn a $500 million contract is starting to see a slump snowball because of it. That's one of the reasons why it's not bad to go get a great player and then sign him for a bunch of years and get him comfortable and relaxed and just let him play, because he's never been in this position before where he's actually playing for a contract. And it could be part of why he sucks right now. That seems really harsh, such a good player, but he sucks right now. He's bad. And it's actively killing the Cubs because in the first half, they got some crazy offensive production. Like Kelly and Petecrow was nuts and Kyle Tucker was great. And then Seiya, I think, kind of rode their wake. Seiya seems to be a guy who, when things are going well, Seiya's really hitting. And when things aren't, Seiya's not. And then, and it was the whole thing that I kept saying over and over again, which was Jed has built a team of good players and they don't have any great players. And this team would be a lot better if they could find one great player. And they did. And then we all look like geniuses, me and Jed mostly. That's all that's important, for about 3 months. And then David Letterman once famously said there was no off position on the genius switch, but I think the Cubs found one and they turned it right off. How's Seiya doing on the second half? Well, let's look. I'm sure it's fine. 2, 312, 286, 2 homers, 8 RBIs, 21 strikeouts, 15 walks, 93 plate appearances. Well, he's walking. That's good, I guess. We might need more than that. And then there's Michael Busch, who I guess he's homered in back-to-back games, batting leadoff, so it's picking it up. But that was like, I think it was supposed to be a temporary solution, kind of like, speaking of Rizzo, kind of like when the Cubs offense would struggle, or at least Rizzo would struggle, and mostly the offense would struggle, and Joe would have him lead off for a couple of days, and he'd hit a homer, and everybody get all happy, and then everything would be fine until they weren't. And maybe that's why Busch went to the top spot against righties and Nico against lefties. But other than a couple of leadoff homers, Busch has been pretty bad leading off. I don't remember off the top of my head. It's like 188, 293, 303, something like that. Now, the slugging will have gone up because he hit 2 in the last couple of days. But it hasn't worked. I don't know what. You got the same 9. It's just the order that you put them in. Like, who wants to make the most outs today? Well, we'll put them at the top of the order, I guess. So the Busch thing, I think, if this was a real organization, and clearly not, he would be trending towards being an ex-Cub by next year. For the simple reason that there's way too much bad in his offense. When he's hot, he's really hot, and he piles up most of his numbers in a short period of time and then just doesn't hit for a month and then gets hot for a few days, and you're like, he's a good player. And as sad, we know from Carson Kelly that you can, if you get your OPS up pretty fast, you can make it hang there for a while. Carson's still over 800, and he hasn't done dick since the 1st of May. I got when Busch, the last hot streak he had, we really enjoyed it because he had 3 homers in a game against the Cardinals, and then he had a homer the next day. So in those 2 games, he had 4 homers. At that point in the season, he was hitting 297, 384, 566. And that's a really, really good. That's an OPS of pretty close to 1,000. I don't know geometry, but I do know that OPS is of 1,000. That's just regular math. So really good. Here's a 30 game since. 170, 243, 330. Which has coincided with him getting more at bats. He's played more against lefties, which has not worked. And he has, although that seems to be over. Craig tried that for a few days and went, yeah, see, this is why you don't hit against him. And with him batting leadoff and getting more at bats, and he's made a lot more outs. And so that's it's year 2 for him. So I guess smart guy would have a little more confidence or in continued improvement. But Busch is not young. He's 28. I just think you need at a first base, you need more consistent production, especially if you're going to go into next year and you're still stuck with Happ in left field. You're going to be getting less and less and less out of him. You know what you're going to have in right. Maybe nothing. Just don't play anybody there. Now, the thing I want you to remember about Owen Caissie, the albino rhino, and it's not RYNO, it's rhino, like rhinoceros. Just remember when you watch him play, folks, this is all the Cubs are ever going to get out of the Yu Darvish trade, is whatever he does. Because the other 3 teenagers they got have all either completely shit the bed and are out of it, or they're, what's the one with the weird name I think is still around? Reginald Preciado, but it's not happening. So whatever you get, it's all one or nothing. And, you know, when AJ Preller made that trade with Jed, he just, I mean, Jed had to hear him laughing through the phone, right? Like even with his hand cupped over, he just had to go like, look at what this fucker's taking for you. Good Lord. So there's that. I don't know how you fix the offense. What I do know is that we knew this was an issue before the trade deadline, and they just didn't do anything. They just said, oh, no, we're fine. Matt Shaw got hot, and we don't need a third baseman. It's like, okay, that was the wrong thing to take from that, is what that was. That's not what you were supposed to take from Matt. That was supposed to be, oh, cool, Matt is hitting. If we add a bat, it'll give us a lot more options, right? Now, let's just say they got an Eugenio Suarez, which they should have got. And considering what the Mariners got him for, the Cubs should have been able to top that. Now, maybe the Mariners would have just kept upping it. And I know the Mariners have pitching prospects to trade, and the Cubs never have them. The Cubs just don't produce pitchers, as Javier Assad reminded us the other night. Over the last, since 2019, it's Justin Steele and Cade Horton. Cade looks good. Still a little worried about him running out of gas, although I think they've done a good job with him. He looks like he's going to be a really good pitcher. But they literally went from Mark Pryor and Carlos Zambrano. Carlos came up the year before. So 2002 to 19, is that when Steele came up? But they just didn't develop a good pitcher, ever. And it's not like they have a whole, like they figured it out and they got all these guys down there. They don't. They really don't. And so it hamstrings them when they try to make a trade, because you saw what went. There were a lot of young pitchers that got traded. I mean, the Padres traded their number 1 prospect was a shortstop. It was like the 4th overall prospect. But mostly it was young pitching. The Cubs don't have it, so they can't, which is bad. In case you were wondering, it's bad. But the move there was, say let's just use Suarez as an example. You get a Eugenio Suarez. Well, that gives you the freedom then. You can play some third base, and you can pick matchups where you don't want Matt Shaw to play. And that's fine. But he can DH, and if you want to get Happ out of the lineup, Seiya goes and plays left field, and Busch is playing. The Diamondbacks even gave Eugenio a 2-inning cameo at first base right before the trade. Before the trade, he literally played 2 innings in an extra inning game against Pittsburgh. Like, see, you can do it. I pulled the video clip of him very awkwardly catching a routine throw from second. But so there might have been an option there if you were willing to. Really, he can't be any worse than Turner, who's used to be not a bad infielder, but he's old. So he could have done that. He didn't do it. He just didn't decide, oh, offense is good enough. And it wasn't then, and it certainly isn't now. And the same thing with the starting pitching. It just, they're like, oh, we're getting Tyon and Assad back, and it's going to be just like, well, you needed better than that, right? Like, Tyon in a playoff start he's going to give up 5 runs in 4 innings. So whoop-de-fucking do. He doesn't beat good teams. He hasn't, ever since he got to the Cubs. He's fine. He's like an innings eater with pretty decent overall numbers who you just don't want pitching in a really important game. But they just couldn't do it. You know, and they give the whole, well, everybody asked for Horton and Shaw, and we just can't do that. Those aren't prospects. Those are your players. Like, you need those 2. So this idea with this wonderful farm system of yours and all these guys, we're the 6th best farm system, and all the prospect perverts are telling everybody how great the Cubs system is. Other teams looked at that and went, nah, there's nothing there. I'm going to get to what Carter said, which I blame Sam Fells for this because I didn't know. Jesse Rogers wrote it. I mean, I have a hard time reading crayon. I don't know what, maybe it's my old age. So I don't read a lot of Jesse. But he wrote an article where some anonymous sources break down the Cubs' playoff chances with the roster they have now. Those anonymous sources, I got to tell you, are way too optimistic. But we'll get to that in a minute. But I wrote this, and I think I said this on the last pod. I'm just constantly talking to people, and I forget all the pearls of wisdom. I forget who I've given them to, so I apologize if you're getting a repeat pearl. That's a thing. That's not a thing. I enjoyed this team early in the year. It was fun to watch and play, but I never harbored any like hope for I didn't look at them ever and go, wow, this is a team that go in the World Series. This is a pathetic name drop because it's Cap, who we all know. But we went to a Cub game a few weeks ago and we hung out and he was with us and we sat in the bleachers. I'm like, hottest fucking day ever. It was miserable. And the Cubs lost to the Royals. So it was that day. And at one point, Cap just looked around and said, man, wouldn't it be great if they win the World Series again this year? And I tried not to laugh because I'm like, I've never thought this team was really that good. What I thought was, okay, this team's pretty good and it's fun to watch and it's probably going to win the division. That was before I didn't realize that ruddy-faced Matt Purfey and his pocket pancake Brewers were going to not lose a game for a month, 2, whatever. I thought, okay, this is a pretty good team. If they get to the deadline and they're serious about it and they add a bat and a front, yeah, maybe they could. This would be really cool. And then that's why it was so frustrating that they just sat and didn't do squat. You know, we got like Andrew Kittredge, who the Orioles were like, he's okay. He's not great. He's not in our plans. We're just going to totally rebuild our bullpen next year without him. That's how good he is. And the Taylor Rogers thing was basically a gift. The Reds had sent him to the Pirates in the Key Brian Hayes trade, which I'll never understand. Oh, he's already won a game for him. That really nice play he made when Dansby should have beat it but couldn't hit the bag. Unbelievable. It should not happen to a major leaguer that you miss first base. The Cubs, that's some shit base running going to first base, and they've done it all year. Like this is they talk about what a good base running team they are, but this is a team that like those runners trying to beat throws at first. The Cubs routinely think that they're like Carl Lewis in the '84 Olympics in the long jump. They're like throw themselves in the air for the last like 10 feet to the bag. Like Carl a little farther. That was like 29. That's not how you run to first base. Like that's not your normal stride at full speed is faster than you lunging for the bag. It just is. This is not Walter Payton. You don't have to, you're not jumping over a defender to try to get to the end zone to get to first. They're not trying to tackle you there's no reason to jump, just run. Anyway, so Taylor Rogers I'm all over the place. Taylor Rogers went from the Reds to the Pirates in that deal because the Reds were taking on all of Brian Hayes' money. And the Pirates had no intention of keeping Taylor because they don't want to pay anybody anything. And so he was like a free reliever that the Cubs got. Like, he was a pretty good lefty. And he is, right? Alarmingly, he's only had one bad season his entire career, and it was for Craig Counsell. The Brewers Counsell is probably like, what? Oh, no, Rogers sucks. And they're like, no, he doesn't. They added that. And like I said, they added Willie Castro, I think because they think he can play multiple positions at once. And then the great Mike Soroka, who lasted 2 innings. And we're never going to see him again. Way to go for it, guys. The Cubs front office operates under 2 complete fallacies. And I don't know if they know that they're fallacies and they just do it publicly to try to convince Cub fans that their conservative ways are the smart way, or they're just too fucking dumb and they don't realize that they're fallacies, but they are. And they fit together pretty well. And I think they instruct what happened at the deadline. And those are Jed's mind-boggling, wrong, stupid take that he has repeated on several occasions over the last year, that the World Series Cubs screwed up the future by trading so many top prospects to try to chase the first World Series, which they got, and the second World Series, which they didn't. Number one, if it were true, who gives a shit? The whole idea is to win, and they won. And the whole idea is when you open the window, to try to keep that window open as long as you can. Because as the current Cubs are finding out, sometimes the window doesn't open. You paint it as shut. But the other part that's wrong about it is they didn't do it. They didn't trade a bunch of great prospects. The 2 best prospects they traded in that entire run from 2015 up until they threw their hands up in the air and quit in 2021 were Gleyber Torres, who they traded to the Yankees for Aroldis Chapman. And even if Gleyber had turned into a star, it still would have been worth it because they would not have won that World Series without Aroldis, because he was their whole bullpen in the entire playoffs. Because before the season ended, Hector Rondon got hurt. Strop was dealing with an injury, and in the playoffs, they just didn't get a lot of quality innings out of anybody. except for Aroldis. And they were overusing him, and they knew they were overusing him, and Joe didn't care because Aroldis wasn't coming back. And people look at like, well, you get that home run to Roger Davis, and it almost lost it. Almost. Joe and Aroldis still get shit for almost losing Game 7 of the World Series that the Cubs won. The thing we waited for our whole lives, and we're supposed to be pissed at two guys who played key roles in winning the World Series because their Game 7 didn't meet our standards. I mean, I love Javi. Javi made 2 errors in that game. He struck out trying to bunt with the bait, trying to suicide. I guess it was a safety squeeze. Labor for Aroldis, perfectly fine. The other one would have been Dylan Cease for Jose Quintana. And if you want to give Theo shit for that, fine. Go find him. He's sitting on a pile of cash. He'll pull some of the money out of his ear and listen to you for a second. But the whole idea behind that trade was Quintana was, the Cubs were having a hard time developing pitching. Quintana was a good pitcher, still young for an established veteran. He's still pitching for guys. Now he's pitching for the Brewers. It was 8 years ago. He's still around on a really cheap contract. That was the whole appeal of that. And they gave up Cease and they gave up Eloy. And Eloy was good for a year and a half. And then kept getting hurt and getting caught in the net. And it just didn't work. And Cease turned into a pretty good pitcher. He's up and down, but when he's really good, he's really, really good. It would have been nice to have had him. Okay, so you can have Cease is probably the best player they traded. But then show me the list of all the other guys. Who are all these prospects that made it, that were so wonderful, that Isaac Paredes, well, let's see, we got him back and then got rid of him again. Jeimer Candelario, well, got him back and then got rid of him again. And I just don't know who all these guys are that really came back to bite the Cubs, or how valuable they would have been had you kept them. But I know why Jed does it. Jed does it to explain why the 21 Cubs had to sell everybody off because he had to restock the farm system. Well, the fact that your farm system sucked didn't have anything to do with the few guys you traded away, because those guys wouldn't have been in your farm system in 2021. Your farm system is because you drafted so poorly. When you look at the prospects that if you look at the 2014 Cub prospect list, there's a lot of great players on there. There's more than a typical team would have. I mean, you look at that list and you've got Chris Bryant and Javi Baez and Addison Russell, and Addison failed for the most ridiculous of reasons, and Kyle Schwarber. They're all there. Well, what was the other thing they had in common? They were all top 10 picks. And you do get credits. Some teams blow their top 10 picks. But the Cubs' entire farm system over that time was built on picking guys in the first 10 picks of drafts. And that was it. Nobody else developed. They didn't have anybody. That wasn't because you traded away guys at the deadline to get Justin Wilson or Jose Quintana or Nick Castellanos or whatever. That was because you did a shit job of drafting and signing and developing minor leaguers. It didn't have anything to do with you being too aggressive during the World Series years, but that's the thing he's clinging to. And then the other part that is their Cubs aren't even the only team that tries to peddle this bullshit to their fans, is the idea that 2 years ago, the Diamondbacks won 83 games, knocked the Cubs out of a playoff spot with a couple of days left to go in the season, and went on to win the pennant. And what that showed is when you get to the postseason, everything resets. And if you can get hot, you can go to the World Series. But the thing that they conveniently don't remember or don't tell you, they probably do know, is those Diamondbacks were good, right? They were, for most of the first half, the best team in the National League. Like, everybody's like, holy shit, the Diamondbacks got good fast. They're really good. And then they had a couple of injuries and some poor play, and they went on the skids. And the third wild card, what Jed will tell you is the third wild card is just an extra ticket. It's an extra way for a team that might not be great, but they're spunky, to get in the playoffs and then spunk their way to the World Series. Maybe that's why they kept Reese McGuire. They're going to try to spunk their way to the World Series. We're going to spunk our way to the World Series. But that's not what the Diamondbacks did. What the Diamondbacks used the third wild card spot for was to salvage what was looking like a terribly wasted season. Like this really good team that went on a bad stretch and completely botched what should have been a really good season. Well, the third wild card opened the door and they got back in, and the teams that had to play them all went, God damn it. Who let the Diamondbacks in? They didn't beat the Phillies because they were spunky. They beat the Phillies because they were good. And the Phillies knew it when they saw them. It was like, oh, this is going to be a real thing. And it was a real thing. And the Phillies came out on the wrong end of it. Without injuries and some bad luck, those Diamondbacks are probably a 94-win team. And then nobody gets to make this stupid argument. Nobody gets to do it. but they weren't because of injuries and stuff. They were an 83 win team with 94 win talent. There, I finally spit it out. Who went to the World Series on merit? They weren't just this. They're not the 87 Twins that used this crazy deafening dome to beat better teams and win a World Series. They were good. So Jed's argument is horseshit. They went to the deadline with their excuse after the deadline was two things. Number one, we didn't want to sacrifice any of our brilliant future because we know how bad that can turn out. Yes, you might accidentally win a World Series. That could happen. And we don't really need to win that many games. We just have to get in the playoffs. It's like, no, neither of those things are true. God damn it. So let's get to Carter. So Jesse wrote this article. It's on ESPN.com, and it's August 8th. MLB 2025. Do Cubs instead of the Cubs? Do Cubs have a World Series level roster? Jesse didn't write that line, but he would have written something as unintelligible as that. And basically what he talks about how is the teams that the Cubs are competing with for a playoff spot, except for the Brewers and the Dodgers. The Dodgers who already have like 75 pitchers. They're just all in the 60-day IL. They didn't really have room to add anybody else. And then the Brewers who, got Shelby Miller, and I'm sure that Shelby will have a 0.01 ERA for the rest of the season. That's all they got. They did unload Nestor Cortez. That was their big thing. But other teams like the Phillies, the Mets, and the Padres, they really aggressively tried to upgrade their team. Now the Mets, the new bullpen they built, is busy sabotaging their season, but you can't say they didn't try. And it'll probably turn itself around just in time to kick the Cubs right in the ass. So anyway, this was Carter. And why? And like Fells wrote, why did they let Carter talk? Whose brilliant idea is it to let Carter speak? This is him talking about why the Cubs weren't able to meet their goals at the deadline. I will argue that they absolutely met their goals. They didn't spend any money, and they didn't trade any of these precious prospects that are never going to be worth a damn. It's hard when you see other teams you're competing with get really good players, but those aren't decisions you're making in the moment. Yes, they are. That's when you're making them. You're trying to win this year. You built a team to win this year, and you have two big holes in it that you could have filled and gone for it. Because if not now, when are you ever going to try to actually win? Their decisions, there. THEIR. Jesse, I think it's they are. They are decisions you're making over the course of the week and the month. It takes some discipline, especially in a moment when you see things moving that way. But we were able to stick to our approach and felt really good about the ads we were able to make. In other words, we felt really good about not doing anything. We loved it. We sat there and went, we haven't improved at all, and this is great. Congratulations to us. Teams are trying to find that guy that can lock down the 8th or 9th inning, but that also costs a lot. You know what also costs a lot? Fucking away leads late. Although my favorite new stat for the Cubs, which they added to on Thursday, is they have now lost 17 games in a row when they have trailed at any point in the game. If you get a 1-run lead on the Cubs at any point during a game, even the top of the first, you're going to win because they aren't coming back from that. Congratulations. Anyway, lock down the 8th or 9th inning, but that also costs a lot. That costs a lot of future wins. You are a large market team, right? You go fucking buy future wins later. You get what you need now if you think you can actually win something. The only explanation would be if Carter was really honest and went, yeah, this team's not good enough to win. And we couldn't find enough to add to it to make it actually good enough to win. So we're just going to roll with this. That at least would be honest. He said, we have a responsibility to the 2025 Cubs, but also the 2032 Cubs. Go fuck yourself. The 2032 Cubs. If there's any team in baseball that shouldn't be worried about about players they're going to try to keep 6 years from now, it's the Cubs. That is just the dumbest thing I've ever read. That's not always popular in the moment. Yeah, it's not because it's dumb. But it's decisions we have to make. No, they're not decisions you have to make. They're decisions you choose to make. You're just trying to save your phony baloney jobs. I mean, that's why you tout prospects that aren't really prospects. That's why you hoard prospects that aren't. That's why you delay this current team doesn't like service time manipulate to save money or get a guy for an extra year. They are conservative calling guys up because when those guys are in the minors, they get lots of credit for all these prospects they have. And then they bring the prospects up and you look at them and go, oh, that guy sucks. And now you can't take credit for him anymore. That's why they do it. There were two reasons why they didn't trade. Number one, I'm sure they could have traded Owen Caissie at the deadline. but the return was clearly not going to be, he wasn't going to be the centerpiece of a deal to get you like Edward Cabrera or Mitch Keller, who I wanted and his pitch like crap, but he's probably just, he's crestfallen that he didn't get traded to the Cubs. And because other teams don't value Owen that much, right? Like apparently he was going to the Marlins in the offseason in a Jesus Luzardo trade. And then the Cubs looked at Jesus's medicals and went, he's bad. And it's like, your medical staff doesn't know. And he hasn't been hurt for the Phillies. What he's had a case of bad start-itis where he'll pitch really well for 4 or 5 starts and he'll just go out and completely blow up and then pitch really well again. So that's the level that the league told you Owen was worth. And I'm sure that is probably even a little less at the deadline. And they would rather have Caissie and give him a few token at bats now and then send him back down and spend the whole winter telling everybody how great he is than they would trading him and having people go, that's all they got for him? Well, that's what he's worth. It's just, it's really frustrating the way this team is run by these guys. And Oleg brought up a point on the pod last week about Jed's role under Theo was kind of be the voice of reason. To kind of be the guy who because Theo's super aggressive and it'd be the guy to tell Theo, I think that's too much to give up, boss. But we see why he played that role, which he apparently didn't play very well because Theo did whatever he wanted. It was fine. It worked. I'd rather have Theo being overly aggressive than Jed doing whatever the fuck this is. Because we see the risk aversion, and you shouldn't be the general manager then of a large market team. You should be the general manager of like the Twins. Go there. That's where you need to be risk averse. This is a big market team that has actual resources, and you can afford to be aggressive, and then they'll figure out a way to, okay, well, that didn't work out, but we'll just go get another guy. I know the Ricketts don't like to do that, and that's why they like Jed. That's why they kept him. The other thing I found crazy for the Cubs, they can generate a PR crisis out of anything. And they didn't get a lot of shit for this, but they should have. So I'm going to give them shit for it because they didn't get enough. The timing of announcing Jed's extension. The Ricketts and Jed, from what I understand, decided back in May that he was staying long-term, right? Like the parameters of the deal were done. In fact, the deal itself may very well have been signed. And then they just said, we'll get around to announcing it. That would have been a good time. When the Cubs were playing well, that would have been a good time to have announced you're keeping Jed. That's when you should have done it. Instead, they waited until right before the deadline, and you get amazing thing like this depressing press conference where Jed has to explain why they didn't do shit at the deadline. And in one of his questions, Bruce Levine starts it with, "Oh, congratulations on your new deal, by the way." And everybody's like, "Why? Why did you give it to him?" The Giants had a similar thing this year with Bob Melvin. Bob has an option on his deal, and Bob's a good manager, and there's no reason not to bring Bob back. But the Giants told Bob they were going to bring him back, and they were going to announce it. They were heading out on a road trip, and Buster Posey wanted to do a press conference and stuff when they got back. Well, they lost like every game on the road trip, and Buster ended up towards the end of the road trip just announcing it. So because now all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, they're probably going to fire Bob." It's like, when you don't know how long good times are going to last. If you've got good news to give out, do it now. Don't wait. Don't hold it. What are you holding it for? But we got a lot more Jed, so that's fun. 5 more years of his weird laugh and overvaluing prospects and saving money for his billionaire bosses. Just what we want. So the Cubs are, I know a bunch of fans were really frustrated at the Mets blowing 3 games to the Brewers where they had a lead in all 3 of them, and they did it in amazing ways. The worst, whatever, was Kodai Senga striking out William Contreras to end an inning, but then getting a pitch clock violation, so there was no pitch, and then giving up a 2-run homer on the next pitch, and that was the difference in the game. That's a beauty. The 5-0 lead in the last game that was gone like 2 innings later. That might end up being very useful for the Cubs because, as they continue to play under 500 baseball, they're sliding back in the wild card, and the Reds are heading in the opposite direction, and the Reds are going to catch somebody. They're going to catch the Mets or the Cubs or the Padres or the Dodgers. The Dodgers and Padres are basically tied. They're very likely going to catch somebody. And the Cubs it's that old, being chased by a bear. It's like you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the other guy the bear is chasing. That could be the Cubs. It could just very well be that the Mets choke harder than they do. And so they still get in. But, this all goes away if Kyle and Pete start to hit. Then all of a sudden these losses, agonizing close losses, become relatively comfortable wins. You get a lead and you add on instead of you get a lead and you hang on to it for dear life and you somehow may still manage to blow it. But if they don't hit, they could miss the playoffs. Of course they could. I don't think it's going to happen because I don't think there's another team chasing them that can catch them. But I could be wrong. I'm wrong a lot. Let's just hope I'm not wrong about this. Anyway, we'll be back next week with Oleg and Praz. That will happen during the middle of that Brewers series, which now seems like it's just going to be a good chance to get kicked in the nuts 5 times in 4 games. So that'll be fun. But who knows? Maybe that's when the Cubs will show up and they'll turn things around. They can take a big chunk out of this stupid lead. Otherwise, they're going to have to try to spunk their way to the playoffs. So see what happens. Thanks, everybody.
Many of us have herpes.
Post-game show is brought to you by Christ, I can't find it. The hell with it.
It's fitting. It's got to be done with one of the best games of all time. Just unbelievable. I mean, got to congratulate the Dolan family.
Thank you. Sean, my podcast co-host Andy, you were his favorite player growing up.
Oh, thank you so much.
Awesome.